There we go. Okay. Hang on a minute, guys. I'm just going to go to, where the heck is our podcast? Come on. Sorry, just getting in my YouTube. And, you know, there's someone that's always leaving comments on, it's a new, every few months there's a new scam. There's the porn ones, and now there's this make $750 a day. That's their YouTube name. They keep leaving comments, and they get into automatically into the moderated ones, but it's always that until you keep flagging them, and it just clogs up everything. But yeah. All right, let me get in here. So,
yeah. Be doing other stuff.
Right, yeah. Them leaving YouTube comments. So we've talked about it in the Zoom for those of you that didn't follow the Serial podcast, but I think most people learned about, hold on a minute.
Carolyn, you muted.
Okay, let's see. Okay, thanks, Gail. So I was saying that we were talking about this case today, and maybe some of you know it, maybe some of you don't know it. It's actually, if you know it, you've probably learned about it from the Serial podcast, which was back in 2014. It was actually probably one of the very first true crime podcasts out there. And so, okay. So we have a circus right now.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. And it's funny because in the update, in the last episode about Adnan, his conviction being overturned and him being released, they kept the MailChimp advertisement. Now, back in 2014, a lot of people didn't know MailChimp. And so when the woman is like, she doesn't know how to pronounce MailChimp, and at that time, but now when you hear it, it's crazy, right? But if you followed the podcast, I think they wanted to make it because that was their sponsor for the podcast, and I'm sure still is. Anyway, let me say hi to everybody. And I'm going to ask you, if you are familiar with this through the Serial podcast, just put yes, and if not, just put no. But there was also an HBO documentary about it, and maybe you found out about it through that. Hi, Tammy. Hi, Deborah Van Coverdon. Hi, Larky. Hi, Gail B. Let's see. Hi, Debbie S. Hi, Janae Ann. Hi, Sean Sneed. Hi, GB. Larky. Who else did we have here? Carolyn P. Oh, we're rhyming. The Captain Lee fan. Chris Ree. Let's see. Margot K. Linda. Janae Ann. We have, okay. Oh, why am I always in top chat and not live chat? So you have, Janae, you're familiar with it, and you too, Carolyn P. And hi, Nona. How are you? That's good. So those of you that are familiar with it, let me ask you something. I'm surprised, Linda, because it's not too far from you. What was your thoughts on it? Like, if you do remember, and I know you might, sometimes it goes out the window. What were your thoughts on this when you were listening? Did you feel that he was innocent, or did you feel, how did you feel? And I'll go over the case for those that aren't familiar with it, because it looks like probably more of you are not as familiar with it. No, I know the court, but I mean, and I don't think you did listen to the podcast, but I'm saying your impression of him from hearing Serial podcast. So, because I was not convinced that myself that he was innocent. If I remember correctly, listening back to the podcast. Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay, sorry. You felt that he was innocent, GB? And you listened to the whole podcast? You know, I scheduled this for 10:15 because my boys are both in cross country. They normally are asleep. We have everything done like 9:30. Even last night, Ethan was asleep at 8:30. Okay? Tonight, if I want the schedule to change, all I have to do is schedule something. Okay. You felt they did not have enough evidence. Yeah, I mean, there were some things, but did I think that, I don't know, there was still things. If I want to go back and listen to the whole thing again, and I'll tell you exactly what it was, but I wasn't convinced. I know I wasn't convinced that he was innocent in it. But let's talk about the timeline of this case, okay? Because if you're not familiar with it. So on Monday, a judge in Baltimore overturned the murder conviction of Adnan Syed, released him from prison after 23 years, and he was in prison because he was convicted of murdering a high school classmate and also his ex-girlfriend. His case received tremendous coverage through that Serial podcast, and I was telling everybody in Zoom today that was there that it was funny because when she started this, she didn't know that it was going to be that big, and it grew. It was crazy. It just hooked people in, and every week she would have a new show, or I think it was a week, or it might have been 2 weeks, and everybody would look forward to it. And then they did a parody of it on Saturday Night Live because there was no big ending that there could be. Like, it wasn't that, she found this evidence that exonerated him or got him a new trial or anything. It didn't end that way. So while you're listening to it and not maybe knowing this case, because I think, I didn't know this case when it was in a trial, only know of it from 2014 with the podcast, that there was no big ending. So it's on Saturday Night Live. They, I don't know which actress they had playing her, but they put her in the podcast room and they're like, oh, we can't wait until this, everybody's hanging on this last episode of Serial. And you see, and she's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But that was it. There wasn't any big ending. And then through the years, you've heard more about overturning the conviction, but it didn't happen. And so when I saw this about, what was it, few days ago, I was like, what? And then Monday, when it happened, it was crazy because remember when we heard, I don't know if you watched Making a Murderer, when we heard a while back that they were going to release the young kid that was there, and everybody was really feels like that kid was railroaded and that was so wrong, and everybody was so happy about him getting out, and then it just didn't happen, right? So I thought, this is strange. It just boom. Anyway, so yeah, it happened. So his case was popularized in that Serial podcast and raised questions about the conviction back in 2014 through that podcast, and a flurry of legal activity followed that. And last week, prosecutors asked a judge to overturn his conviction, and what they said is the state no longer has confidence in the integrity of the conviction. Now, they didn't say he's innocent. They didn't acquit him. They said they don't have confidence in his conviction, and that's because there are two additional suspects. They won't release the names of them. Just call them the suspects. And there were notes that were found about these suspects, and it doesn't seem like they were investigated properly, and also that the information wasn't handed over to the defense, and that's a Brady violation. So that in and of itself. Now, he is 41 years old now. He is ordered to serve home detention while prosecutors weigh whether to proceed with a new trial or drop the charges, and they have 30 days to decide. Now, I just watched something with a legal analyst who said his opinion is that they're not going to retry this. Okay, that those 30 days that the prosecution has, he doesn't believe they're going to retry the case. They don't retry the case, then they're not saying he's innocent, because if they say he's innocent, then they put the state of Maryland on the hook for this wrongful conviction. So what will happen then is he'll have to take his case to civil court. So, but let's look at about this. So in 1999, Heyman Lee is killed. And let me just put up a picture of the both of them. Here you go. Go over there. Okay. She was 18 years old, and she was killed by strangulation. They were students at Woodlawn High School in Baltimore County, Maryland. She disappeared after leaving school one day, and her body was found nearly a month later, where it was buried in a park. An investigation led to Adnan Syed. He was a fellow student who dated her. He was arrested, and he pled not guilty. He was found guilty. Prosecutors relied heavily on testimony by Jay Wilds. Now, Jay Wilds is a friend of Adnan Syed's, who testified that he helped Adnan bury her body. They presented cell phone tower records that they said placed Adnan Syed near the park where her body was found. Now, they're also calling into question cell phone records. So, yeah. A jury found Adnan Syed, who was 17 at the time of Heyman Lee's death, guilty of murder, robbery, kidnapping, and false imprisonment. And he was sentenced to life in prison. Becky Feldman is someone that started to open this up for the prosecutor's office, and Sarah Koenig was the podcast host. Just so you know that. Okay, so 14 years later, and I'm sorry, Lurk, I had that wrong. In 1999, she was killed. 2000 was the conviction. 2014 was the podcast. So you're right about that, about the conviction. Now, 14 years later, the Serial podcast raised doubts about the facts of the case. In 2020, the New York Times bought the Serial podcast production company. And that's the company behind, of course, the podcast of Serial. Back to that was 12 weekly episodes, and it revealed the existence of an alibi witness for Mr. Syed, who was with him in the library when Ms. Lee was killed. The witness, Asia McLean, said she had been willing to testify, but Mr. Syed's lawyer, Maria Cristina Gutierrez, did not contact her. Ms. Gutierrez was disbarred in 2001 after a series of client complaints emerged. So then you have ineffectual counsel, you see. So he adds like so many things, okay, going on here. The series also questioned the credibility of the cell phone tower records and revealed that physical evidence gathered in 1999 was never tested for Mr. Syed's DNA. Now, they went back and they did some DNA testing with Becky Feldman, and that really didn't yield anything of any substance. And that was why this partial reason this is overturned, because there was nothing there. You have these two additional suspects. There was evidence that, the investigation was sloppy, and there were handwritten notes that Becky Feldman found when she started to go over this case from investigators about these suspects, and now these suspects one of them had threatened Ms. Lee, and another one of them had a bit of a criminal past with sexual assaults in the back of it. So there was real questions on why this wasn't looked into more. Okay. So now in February of 2015, a Maryland court agreed to hear an appeal from Adnan Syed. In November, a judge granted him a new hearing that would allow the introduction of new evidence. In the hearings, Adnan's defense team argued that his original defense had been grossly negligent and that they presented the testimony of the alibi witness. The team also questioned why the original lawyer had not questioned the reliability of the cell phone tower records. A judge grants a new trial in June, and the state appealed the ruling. Now, Ms. Lee's family expressed pain and outrage at the decision to grant a new trial, saying that they continued to believe justice was done when Mr. Syed was convicted of killing Hay. Lawyers asked for him to be released on bail, but that motion was denied. The Maryland Court of Special Appeals upheld the decision to grant Adnan Syed a new trial, and they vacated his conviction. This is in 2018 now, agreeing that he had received ineffective legal counsel, but he remained incarcerated. In 2019, Maryland's highest court denies the new trial, and they reversed the decisions from 2018. Maryland's highest court, the Court of Appeals, ruled in a 4-3 decision that while the original defense lawyer had been deficient, that Mr. Syed was not prejudiced by the deficiency. It denied him a new trial, and it reinstated his conviction. In November, the United States Supreme Court declined to hear his case. A 4-part HBO documentary, beginning in March, The Case Against Adnan Syed, revealed that DNA tests performed at the request of Mr. Syed's new lawyers did not find anyone else's DNA on Ms. Lee or her belongings. Okay. I'm just going to put up a different picture. Because this is him today. All right. Then, March of 2022, prosecutors agreed to new DNA testing, saying that it was merited because of advances in genetic profiling. A new Maryland law allowed prosecutors the discretion to modify sentences of offenders if they were under 18 at the time of their crimes, and he was 17, and have served at least 20 years in prison, both of which he checks the boxes for. On September 14th, prosecutors asked a judge to overturn Adnan Syed's conviction. This is what I saw. I've never seen like this happen so fast. I mean, not when you're looking back on the timeline, you're not thinking it's fast, but I mean from where they ask him to overturn it to where he's out, without a hitch, it seems. On September 14th, they asked the judge to overturn Mr. Syed's conviction. They said an investigation had uncovered the potential involvement of 2 alternative suspects, key evidence that prosecutors might have failed to provide to Mr. Syed's lawyers, and significant reliability issues regarding the most critical pieces of evidence that were presented at trial. They asked that he be granted a new trial at a minimum and released on his own personal recognizance. After nearly a year-long investigation reviewing the facts of the case, Syed deserves a new trial where he is adequately represented and the latest evidence can be presented. Marilyn J. Mosby, the state attorney for Baltimore City, said, Mosby in a statement. On September 19th, Judge Melissa P. Finn of Baltimore City Circuit Court, she vacated the conviction in the interest of justice and fairness, and Adnan Syed walked out of prison, and he will serve home detention while awaiting word on whether prosecutors will proceed with a new trial. Now, they have 30 days in which to decide this. And like I said, I did see a legal analyst, I believe it was on CBS News, say that he thinks they will drop it. So I want to go into a little bit more of actually what Heyman Lee, what? Her family is very upset. Her brother wanted to go to the court. He asked the judge to please postpone this so he could get from California there, and they said no, but that he could appear via Zoom, which he did. And I'll tell you what they're saying about this. Okay. They released a statement. The attorney for the Lee family requested that Syed's hearing be just postponed until the family could participate. The judge ruled against that. However, her younger brother, Young Lee, made a statement to the court via Zoom, asking the judge to postpone the hearing. He said, "This is not a podcast for me. It's real life that will never end. It's been 20 plus years. It's a nightmare. This is killing us," he said. Steve Kelly, who's the lawyer for the Lee family, spoke outside of the courthouse saying that he and the Lee family are disappointed that the hearing happened so quickly and no notice to the family. He said he's not sure if there will be justice for Lee moving forward. And I quote him saying, I can tell you that what was said publicly yesterday by the state attorney, both in argument and by the state's attorney herself outside the courtroom, is going to make it virtually impossible to retry Adnan Syed to the extent that he's the guy who committed this crime. And in addition to that, I think it's going to make it virtually impossible for anybody to ever really be brought to justice. So quite frankly, the Lee family is very hopeless about any justice for Hay, and that's where they are right now. They're despairing. They feel like Adnan Syed is an intentional celebrity. The story is about him. He's been made to be a hero in the media, and Heyman Lee is not part of that narrative. And he also released a statement from the family that said, for more than 20 years, the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office has told the family of Heyman Lee that their beloved daughter and sister was murdered by Adnan Syed. 1 week ago, for the first time, the family was informed that through a year-long investigation that is apparently still ongoing, the state had uncovered new facts and would be filing a motion to vacate Mr. Syed's conviction. For more than 20 years, no one has wanted to know the truth who killed Heyman Lee more than her family. The Lee family is deeply disappointed that today's hearing happened so quickly and that they were denied the reasonable notice that would have permitted them to have a meaningful voice in the proceedings. On Wednesday, Baltimore prosecutors filed a motion to vacate the murder of Syed, saying new information was discovered, citing the possibility of hold on, we went over that was yesterday. And then it's a Brady violation. That's what it is when they fail to hand over that evidence to the defense. And that was the evidence of those two suspects. And those two suspects, one of them was connected to a place that was very relevant, and the other one had made a threat. So that was a big part of this. Now, let me go over here. And then we go to him, Adnan, returning home after all of these years behind bars. And one of the first stops he made was to the refrigerator. After over 20 years behind bars, serving a life sentence, the 41-year-old was a free man on Monday. Hours later, his longtime friend, who's also an attorney and has been fighting for him this whole time, is Rabia Chaudhry, shared a video of Adnan combing through a refrigerator looking for something to eat. In the clip, Syed took out samosas and dumplings from the fridge as he's walked through his options by a loved one. We got fresh samosas coming through, Chaudhry said off screen as Syed tried a dumpling. Pretty good, Syed said. And this is Rabia Ochadri. Let me put a picture of that up. And so, yeah, I mean, I probably would say I would agree with that legal analyst that I don't think they will decide within 30 days to retry this. And I don't know if any of those other suspects, will ever be brought to trial either. And so is the family, it seems pretty justified to feel now hopeless for, hey, about what they thought all this time the person that did this was behind bars, and now, everything has changed in just a few days. So, yeah. I don't know. It's you have to feel for the family. You have to, say who are these suspects, and what prosecutors said that they will continue their investigation and bring a suspect or suspects to justice, but also are not saying at this time that Syed is innocent. So we'll have to see what happens in these 30 days. But the state no longer has confidence in the integrity of the conviction. Let's see. And Rabia Chaudhry said, we have spent 23 years fighting the state, and now the state is saying they got it wrong, maybe. And the state is saying he did not deserve to be convicted. Her voice was wavering with emotions. To not have to fight the state is incredible, she said. So, let me look at the chat here for a second and see what you guys are. Here we are. Okay, close that. So, wonder if election is coming into play with decisions. They messed up the release event. They had an intense teenage love affair. Then she broke up with him, dated someone else. They used that as the main motive to convict him, Janae says. High 61 says he's pumped, finally got a 19. Springfield, oh, good for you, High. You agree, Captain Lee fan, someone killed her. They need to find out who did it. I don't think Adnan did it. So you don't think Adnan did it, Janae? Debbie says both sides live with a pit in the stomach. Yeah, I agree on that. Adnan's sister was a huge fighter for his innocence. So, well, no, he doesn't have to do the Alford plea. I don't think it's like that at all, but because the state is saying they don't have confidence in the conviction. That wasn't the case in Michael Peterman, But we'll see what happens. I mean, you have to feel for the family too, because now these other two suspects, are they going to be brought to justice? Is it just going to be forgotten about? I don't know. You didn't think there was enough evidence to convict him, Slam RN says. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you don't really think he did it. There are some other people who looked guilty. And if you listen to the latest episode of Serial, the names of the suspects are known by her, and they just haven't been released to the public. Hi, Nanette. But You don't want to see somebody that's innocent behind bars, or, nobody wants to see that. If the prosecution doesn't stand by the conviction, then they definitely won't go for retrial. Yeah, I don't think they will either, and I don't know about what they have on the other suspects, if they're going to bring something forward for them. You just want justice for Hay. And then sister. Now let me just look at something else here. She disappeared on January 13th, 1999. Her body was found weeks later in a shallow grave in Baltimore's Laking Park. She had been strangled. Prosecutors argued that Syed, 17, and a fellow senior at Woodlawn had killed her after she broke up with him. Jurors found him guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, robbery, and false imprisonment. A judge sentenced him to life in prison plus 30 years. Syed has always maintained his innocence and fought his conviction. Heyman Lee was 18 and a popular student at Woodlawn High School. A teacher described her as one of those rare people you meet in life who is always happy, always joyful, and full of love. She played field hockey and lacrosse at Woodlawn, and the school retired her jersey number, which was 22, which she wore for both sports after her death. Lee and Syed dated, but largely kept their relationship under wraps from their families, in part because of cultural and religious differences. Lee was Korean American and Syed is of Pakistani descent. Lee's family said in 2016 that they believe Syed was guilty. They declined to participate in the production of Serial, the podcast. Now, what is Serial? Well, in 2013, lawyer Rabia Chaudhry contacted Sarah Koenig, a producer with the radio program This American Life. Chaudhry, a longtime friend of Syed, was convinced he was wrongly convicted. She wanted Koenig to investigate the case, and the result was Serial, which was a podcast released in 12 episodes in the fall of 2014. It became a smash hit and a cultural phenomenon. It reached millions of listeners, it won a Peabody Award, and it helped fuel the popularity of podcasts, especially those focused on true crime. Serial released 2 subsequent seasons focused on other stories, but they never were like this one, Can't just do it. Usually So, let's see here what we have here. So what new facts or evidence have the prosecutors mentioned? The biggest bombshells from the state's attorney's motion was that the original prosecutors suppressed evidence that could have helped the defense in what is known in criminal law as a Brady violation. In particular, prosecutors at the time did not share with the defense that they had information about alternate suspects with a motive to kill Lee, who had previously threatened to make Lee disappear and said that he would kill her. The state attorney said there are 2 suspects, alternate suspects, in Lee's murder, that they may have worked together. One of the suspects has a criminal history of attacking women in her car, and one has a credible history of and sexual assault. Now, one of them, I believe, is incarcerated at this time. Said that through the motion, they did not specify if both pieces of new information applied to one of the alternate suspects or a mix of the 2. Prosecutors know the identities of the alternate suspects but did not name them because they have not been charged with a crime relating to Lee's murder. The motion also described new information that indicate some of the evidence used to convict Syed, such as cell phones, cell data from the time, was unreliable. Did the court say that Syed was innocent? No, they didn't. They made this clear in the motion, and they distinguished between finding Syed's initial conviction flawed and perhaps unconstitutional and saying he's innocent. So they did not say he is innocent. To be clear, the state is not asserting at this time that the defendant is innocent, read the motion. Prosecutors have 30 days to decide if they wish to retry Syed's case or drop the charges against him altogether. In the meantime, prosecutors say they will continue their investigation and bring a suspect or suspects to justice. So her brother said he was not against an investigation or anything of that sort, and he said, knowing that there could be someone out there free for killing my sister, it's tough. But he said it's really tough for him to swallow this, and especially for his mom. And that prosecutors' motion to vacate the conviction left her brother feeling betrayed. Now, Stephen J. Kelly, who's attorney for the family, we read there. Let me see. Yeah, I'll read this again, this statement. For more than 20 years, no one has wanted to know the truth of who killed Hyman Lee more than her family. The Lee family is deeply disappointed that today's hearing happened so quickly and that they were denied the reasonable notice that would have permitted them to have a meaningful voice in the proceedings. So, yeah. Let's see if there is. Go over here for 1 second. Hyman Lee was born, hold on a second here, October 15, 1980. She's a Korean-American high school student, last seen alive on January 13, 1999 in Baltimore County, Maryland. Again, her body was found 4 weeks later in Leakin Park, and she had been killed by manual strangulation. She was born in South Korea in 1980. She emigrated with her mother, Young Kim, and her brother, Young Lee, to the United States in 1992 to live with her grandparents. She attended the magnet program at Woodlawn High School near Baltimore, Maryland. She was an athlete who played lacrosse and field hockey. Again, disappeared January 13th, 1999. Her family reported her missing after she failed to pick up a younger cousin from daycare at around 3:15 p.m. She attended Woodlawn High School that day and had been seen by several people leaving the campus at the end of the school day. The Baltimore police immediately began investigating her disappearance. And that day, officers called various friends of Lee to try to find her. They reached Adnan Syed, who was her former boyfriend, early around 6:30 p.m. that evening. He said the last time he saw her was around the time that the classes ended at school. At 1:30 a.m., they reached her boyfriend, who said he had not seen her that day. On February 6th, a dog-led search was conducted around Woodlawn High School. Lee's partially buried body was discovered by a passerby in Leakin Park in Baltimore on February 9th. Police attention became focused on the person who reported finding the body. The Baltimore City Police Homicide Division received an anonymous call on February 12th, which suggested that investigators should focus on Lee's ex-boyfriend and classmate, Adnan Syed. One of Syed's friends, Jay Wilds, told police that Syed had expressed intentions of killing Lee and stated that he had helped Syed bury Lee's body after Syed confessed to killing her on January 13th. The Baltimore police applied for cellular phone records for a phone belonging to Syed on February 16th. Syed was arrested on February 28th, and he was charged with first-degree murder. Now, Syed's family hired a defense attorney, Christina Gutierrez to represent him. His first trial began in December of 1999, but ended in a mistrial after just 3 days. Jurors accidentally overheard a sidebar dispute between Gutierrez and the presiding judge. Gutierrez interrupted a statement by the judge as tantamount to accusing her of lying and said as much, unaware that members of the jury were in earshot. After learning the jury had overheard the exchange, the judge granted Gutierrez's motion for a mistrial. Syed's second trial began in January and lasted 6 weeks. On February 25, 2000, the jury found Syed guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and robbery. Syed was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years, and Syed's family immediately fired Gutierrez following the verdict. Syed appealed his conviction in 2003 unsuccessfully. He later made an appeal for post-conviction relief in 2010 based on ineffective assistance of counsel. And that was based on Gutierrez's failure to investigate an alibi witness, Asia McClain, who maintained that she was talking with Syed in the library at the exact time that prosecutors say Syed attacked Lee in a Best Buy parking lot several miles away. The judge ruled that Gutierrez's decision not to call McClain as a witness was part of her defense strategy rather than an act of incompetence. The judge said the letters that McClain sent Syed in jail were weak and possibly damaging evidence for the defense, since they did not state the time she saw him at the library and contradicted Syed's own account from that day. And this appeal was initially denied in 2014. And I saw these letters and it didn't. Something was like weird. It's just like, I don't even know if you remember me or something like, but I talked to you. I don't know. It just didn't, something seemed wacky about those letters. On February 6, 2015, the Maryland Court of Special Appeals approved Syed's application for permission to appeal for a potential hearing on the admissibility of the alibi testimony of Asia McClain. On May 18, 2015, the Maryland Court of Special Appeals remanded the case to the Circuit Court for Baltimore City, and Syed's lawyer, C. Justin Brown, filed a motion on August 24, 2015, saying that a newly recovered document showed that the cell tower evidence used by prosecutors was misleading and should not have been admitted at trial. Now, this is something they're admitting now, okay? Additionally, prosecutors have said that 2 other suspects have arisen in the case, though their names have not been released. And this again, back in 2015. On November 6, 2015, Baltimore City Circuit Court Judge Martin Welch ordered that Syed's post-conviction relief proceedings be determined to determine his eligibility for a new trial would be reopened in the interest of justice for all parties. The post-conviction relief hearing, originally scheduled to last 2 days, lasted 5 days from February 3rd to the 9th, and that was in 2016. The hearing was attended by people from across the United States, including the podcast host Sarah Boone. Asia McClain testified that she talked to Syed at the library on January 13th, 1999. On June 30th, 2016, Welch granted Syed's request for a new trial and vacated his conviction, ruling that Gutierrez rendered ineffectual assistance when she failed to cross-examine the state's expert regarding the reliability of cell phone tower location evidence. Welch denied Syed's defense team's motion for bail for the interim. And then on March 29th of 2018, almost 2 years later, the Maryland Court of Special Appeals, the second highest court in the state, upheld Syed's request for a new trial. But then the Court of Special Appeals opinion said that Syed's counsel had failed to contact a potential alibi witness who could have raised reasonable doubt in the mind of at least one juror. Prosecutors and Attorney General Brian Boone asked the Court of Special Appeals to reverse the lower court's ruling and argued that Syed's defense attorney did a thorough job and the witness, Asia McClain, would not have changed the outcome of the case. The prosecution appealed to the Maryland Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in the state. And on March 8th, 2019, in a split 4-3 ruling, The Court of Appeals reversed the findings of the lower courts, and they denied Syed's request for a new trial. While the court agreed that Syed's legal counsel was deficient, they found it was not enough to have swayed the jury to change their decision because the evidence against him was so strong. See, they're saying this evidence was so strong. It does more than call into question the time that the state claimed Ms. Lee was killed and does nothing to rebut the evidence establishing Mr. Syed's motive and opportunity to kill Ms. Lee. The court also ruled that Syed had waived his right to re-examine the validity of the cell phone tower evidence because the issue had not been raised as part of the original petition. On November 25th of 2019, the Supreme Court of the United States rejected Syed's appeal for a new trial. Maryland's Attorney General Brian Boone responded to the Supreme Court's decision by stating the evidence linking Syed to Lee's death is overwhelming, and in a statement said, "We remain confident in the verdict that was delivered by the jury and are pleased that justice for Hae-Min Lee has been done." Now, we know that's all changed, okay, because now he's out and they changed it all over and there's a vacated conviction. As of September, they filed the motion September 15th, 2022, and he was out yesterday, the 19th. He's out, he's released, and they have 30 days now to decide if they're going to retry him, which I don't think they will. And then he can pursue his case in a civil court to hold them accountable for a wrongful conviction. So that's where we are with that, and if anybody wants to, hi Sassy, if anybody wants to call in and Debbie, I don't see Two Scooter in here, Debbie. I don't know whether you're just calling out to her. Are you? Let's see who's, I'll put this back to gallery. Okay. So has anybody on the panel heard the Serial podcast from way back when? I don't think so. Janae, you should call in because it seems like you really follow this. You should call in. I'd like to hear what you think about this. Sassy Darcy, did you follow this when it was on the Serial podcast? Slam RN, did you follow it then? If you're still here? You thought you saw her flash in? Oh, I don't know. I don't see her when I look up. I think you saw there was a shout out for her channel. Maybe you saw that. Hi, Pamela Patrick. You didn't follow it, Sassy? Captain Lee fan, you did? Who was doing it? Any one of you that followed it, like I know Janae, you said you did, but it's been so long. Oh, okay, so. You could still call in. I mean, it's hard. It feels like unless they have enough on these other suspects, that there'll be no justice for her death, for Hayes' death. And that's got to be really upsetting to the family because they lost their daughter and they thought the right person was in prison, and now you're coming up. Okay, good. That's all changed, and it could be that, it's not tried again, which is probably going to be the case. I don't see Tammy either, Sassy. Tammy said she. I don't know, Debbie. Blame the law and the lawyers for being quick to put an innocent person in prison, High 61 said. Well, I was watching something recently, High 61, and they said you don't know how many times this kind of stuff happens in our criminal justice system. So that's unsettling, right? But
the panel quiet anyway, aren't we?
oh, here's Janae. Is this Janae? Hi, Janae. Hi, Janae.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, my gosh, I love this freaking case because I was hooked on podcasts there when they first started becoming popular. And one of the best podcasts out there was Serial.
Oh, yeah. I think you might have. Do you have something else playing though before we? Because I hear us echoing.
I have you playing.
Oh yeah, just mute that and then.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's all right, no problem. So yeah, you were really into this?
Oh my gosh, I was really into this. I listened really to several podcasts because once Serial came out, then other podcasts like True Crime Garage.
Yeah, and there was another one. I have to ask my daughter. There was one, I don't know, maybe you remember it, Janae, where I don't know if it was like it wasn't a series of like different episodes, but they went over like one case or something, and there was this one where this mother stole her daughter's identity and the daughter didn't know. And I mean, they all lived together in the same house and the mother was doing all these underhanded things and getting all these accounts in her daughter's name. And I have to ask my daughter because it was the freakiest thing, but it was over like in an hour. I mean, they told the whole case from beginning to end, and I forget what podcast that was, but they would cover
Some of them do. Some of them do that. They
and there was another one, with a bakery kind of thing, and it was something with marijuana and muffins, and oh my gosh, we used to listen to them all the time, my daughter and I, when we were going places. And I have to remember that just brought that up, and it was like in an hour, it was an entire case, and they were so bizarre. Yeah.
My gosh, I've listened to so many of them, and when my daughter and I went to the beach, I got her listening to them. And so we were finding real good ones to listen to also. So I've listened to so many podcasts, but of course, since this one was the first real big podcast, I do remember the case. And I just remember a few things about it. And one of them was their teenage love affair was just so passionate. I mean, they got a hold of the letters that Adnan and Miss Ming, I can't remember her first name.
Hey.
They got a hold of the letters that these two written to each other, and they were just so very passionate and loving towards each other. I mean, you really got the impression that she was totally in love with him and he was totally in love with her. It was very passionate. And her family was very, very conservative. And so she was not allowed to date or have a boyfriend, whatsoever. And so she had to hide seeing him from her family. And I think he also came from a very conservative family. And I remember their religions were both very important to them. So they were trying to balance all these things, like being teenagers, they're in love, they've got classes, they have a lot of friends, they're in religious groups, they just have all of this stuff going on. And they were both very popular at the high school, very well liked by teachers and their friends. But she did have to sneak out to see him. So I think that was one of the things that made it hard to know where she was at all times, because she was doing a lot of stuff so her family wouldn't find out about it. And he could have been also, if I remember right. But like you said, someone did see him at the library at school late that afternoon.
Right.
And I remember that was one of the things that convinced me that the timeline was off. It was going to be hard to really place him with her, picking her up, going out to this park. The timeline really didn't fit. So, yeah, those are a couple of my observations. And I remember the person that found her was just some random guy that was in this park and decided he had to take a leak, and so walked over.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then they kind of suspected him for a while, so he got himself into all kinds of deep.
Alonzo Sellers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I really didn't think that he was ever a credible, suspect.
Yeah, he said, here's what he said. He said that, he claimed he was driving all while drinking a 22-ounce Budweiser on the way back to a school where he worked as a maintenance man when he realized he had to urinate. So he pulled off the side of the road to go to the bathroom. And he said, and I quote, "I had to go to the bathroom, so I pulled over and I went further in the woods so no one could see me."
Yes.
Yeah, I walked around through the bushes and everything, and I got back that way, and I was getting ready to urinate when I looked down, and I seen something that looked like hair. Something was covered by dirt, and I looked real good again, and that's when I seen what looked like a foot. He walked quite a ways for someone who just has to pee, according to the podcast host on Serial. He said he was drawn to the area where her body was found because it was a clearing, but he briefly became a suspect in the case because of how far he walked to urinate, a whopping 127 feet, according to the podcast. He was interviewed by police 9 days after he found the body, and police questioned him as to why he chose that area. They go over his details carefully because there are parts of his story that are a little weird, said Koenig in the episode 3 of the 2014 podcast. However, she went to the spot where he found the body and determined that it did make sense after all why he'd walked so far. She said that although the body was nearly impossible to spot in photographs, of the crime scene because it blended with the natural surroundings of the ground. 127 feet doesn't seem that far back if you're looking for privacy. And she said that you could still see cars from the road back that far. And let's see.
Oh, wow.
And she said that he also had a bit of a criminal past as an alleged streaker. He had several indecent exposure charges, including one in 1994 for allegedly running naked in a residential neighborhood, and another one in 1996 after he was allegedly spotted in a hoodie, white sneakers, sunglasses, and nothing else. He ran from police and jumped a chain link fence in that incident. Oh my goodness.
No.
Not long before Lee was killed, he also allegedly stood naked in front of a uniformed police officer in her car.
Jeez.
However, when it came to finding the body, Koenig noted that he passed a polygraph test and he soon faded as from law enforcement's mind as a suspect in the murder of Lee. Yeah.
Oh, yes. All coming back to me now.
Yeah.
So they did take a serious look at him. But now, the person that I thought had some culpability in it, or who might be a credible suspect, was the person that you mentioned earlier named Jay.
Jay Wilds.
Yes. Now, Jay Wild, he was a friend of Adnan's, but I think, if I remember right, he had dropped out of high school, or he wasn't really in high school with them, but he was a friend, and he was just a guy that was usually in a lot of trouble. I mean, just good things did not happen around Jay. And then here he is. He was one of the people that gave testimony against Adnan in the trial.
Right.
And some people just couldn't believe that because they thought he was a credible suspect. So you can kind of see how it would be self-serving for him to get up there and lie about Adnan.
Right, and the prosecution stated they no longer could trust Jay Wild's testimony or the cell phone records, which don't hold up separately or together. Jay's story was wildly inconsistent. Moreover, a detective named Bill Ritz, who repeatedly interviewed Jay Wilds, was later accused in a separate case of manipulating and fabricating evidence and not disclosing exculpatory evidence. A separate conviction Ritz secured the same year Adnan was convicted was overturned because of this in 2016.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so there's like problems all around.
Herein lies a mess with one of their main witnesses against Adnan, is that he just proved he wasn't credible. And, I can see why this was overturned.
Yeah.
I really can, because of that Jay. And I think actually he's a more credible suspect than Adnan was at the time. No, I can't remember all of the stuff that Jay Wild did, but a lot of people thought that he was very shady and self-serving.
Well, it says, the star witness at Syed's trial was Jay Wilds, a former classmate who testified that he helped Syed dispose of Lee's body. Jay's testimony was critical to the state's case. Indeed, without his testimony, it's virtually impossible that the state could have even brought Syed to trial. Syed's trial and Jay's testimony became the focus of a This American Life spin-off series, the Serial podcast. And it said Jay chose not to be formally interviewed by either This American Life or by Serial host and producer Sarah Koenig. In the podcast, Koenig pointedly challenged Jay's account of events and his motivation for assisting Adnan. Jay feels strongly that he was unfairly depicted by Koenig and that she painted a highly misleading portrayal of him and his role in the case. The interview, so then he's giving an interview here, is the first time Jay has spoken publicly about events surrounding Lee's death and the trial that ended in Syed's conviction. We met over the weekend at his 2-story suburban home. Jay's wife and mother entertained the couple's young children while Jay and I spoke in the living room. And let's see what they said. He said the interviewer says, in Serial, you were depicted as a petty weed dealer. Is that why you didn't initially cooperate with police? It doesn't look like enough of a reason to not talk to police. And he says, it wasn't like I was selling a nickel bag here and there. At the time, this was Maryland in the 90s. The drug laws were extremely serious. I saw the ATF and DEA take down guys in my neighborhood for selling much less than I was at the time, and they were getting sentenced to 3 and 5 years. I also ran the operation out of my grandmother's house and also put my family at risk. I had a lot more in the line than just a few bags of weed. The other thing to understand is something about the culture of Baltimore. This is where the Stop Snitching video comes from. This is where it was produced. It went national, but it was produced in Baltimore, and that is where people would have their house firebombed and still tell the police they knew nothing about it rather than to try to make some sense of what's going on. And that's not necessarily me, but that is my family, and that is my uncles and cousins. It's where I'm from. And then they said, what did your life look like then? And he said, I rode a lot of BMX freestyle. I got called an Oreo. I had friends, but the groups were small. I never had a big group of friends. I played lacrosse. I was a bit of a jock. The group of people I hung out with were different from the group that I was from. I went to concerts like anything from Wu-Tang to Warped Tour. I was a bit of an outdoorsman, adventure seeker, fishing, camping, learned to ride a motorcycle, went canoeing. By the time I graduated Woodlawn High School in '98, I wasn't exactly angry, but I did resent the school. And they ask him why. And he says, well, when Woodlawn was put in the magnet thing, they took out all the vocational classes. Before, you would just go down there for drafting shop and everyone would commingle and all the students interacted. But when they put the magnet wing in, it was kind of like there were people that were different than us. And they didn't have to interact with us anymore, and they didn't have to go by us except to come to lunch, and that was it. But their gym lockers parking was down in the magnet wing, and I found that to be a bit of a slap in the face because I knew football had paid for all that, but there were very few football players down there. Football paid for everything at this school. I didn't resent the students. I resented the school for setting it up like that. And now, see, that puts in that she was there because it was a magnet school, and he's saying he's resentful of that.
Yeah, well,
right.
He's painting himself in a pretty good light there.
Right.
He's giving himself a lot of grace, and he's remembering himself very well, better than some people might.
Right.
And I think in a lot of neighborhoods, the culture was, snitches get stitches. So
yeah,
that wasn't unique to his neighborhood. That's kind of what was
everywhere,
going on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was going on everywhere, and
it wasn't if you see something, say something. It was snitches get stitches.
Exactly, and so they did have trouble, people coming forward. And he wasn't exactly one to come forward until they basically threatened him and said, well, if you don't, I guess we'll prosecute you for it. It was a little bit shady on everybody's part. How he ended up there as a star witness, being the person that he was not star witness material to put someone in prison for the rest of his life.
Right. And then he says, when they asked him about, what was the first time you hung out with Adnan? And he said, I met him when I was still at Woodlawn, so around '98. Stephanie, Jay's girlfriend, came to me and said, Adnan is pretty cool. Plus, he wanted to buy some weed. I said, isn't he a paramedic? And she said, nah, he's cool. Plus, he wants to buy. I didn't trust him at first. Jay said, and since
Oh.
he wasn't like the people I knew, pot smokers, I made him smoke one time. So he made him. So he got a little high, got a little weird, didn't say that much. He just seemed like someone who didn't smoke weed too much. He had a professional job in high
Yeah.
school. He was a paramedic or something. And it was that Adnan worked as an emergency medical technician, not a paramedic. And he said that he was a little pompous, a little arrogant, but he seemed really driven as far as his academics. But all those magnet students were. So this Jay Wilds has a resentment against both Hay and Adnan.
Yes.
Are you
he
picking
sure
up on
did.
that? Yeah. Then he said he was a magnet. He seemed a little bit more uptight than the other Muslim kids that I knew. He seemed under a lot of pressure to please. I got the feeling the few times of interacting with Adnan that there was this enormous pressure from somewhere trying to make him into something he didn't want to be. There was never a real friendship. I only smoked with him 2 or 3 times. It wasn't like, oh, we're down in the park, come on down. We were friendly, we were cool. I might have sat next to him in class and joked or something, but he didn't call me unless he needed something. It wasn't like, oh, we're going bowling, or let's call in before we go bowling and call the rest of our friends and call Jay. I don't remember ever going to any kinds of functions and endeavors together or any concerts or clubs together, but that's weird. And this kid says, though, and they're not close like that, but that he had him bury the body with him.
Oh, right.
Right, because you're going to
You
go to
know-
somebody that resents you and that you're not too close with, right? That's kind of weird.
Exactly. And he sure does have a lot of self-awareness and insight, compared to back then when he was a teenage punk running around getting in trouble. And I guess you would not think that Adnan and Jay would be friends because they were very different people.
Mm-hmm.
And Adnan was just considered quote unquote good kid. He really was. So it was quite shocking that
Right.
he was charged with this.
And then he
crime.
says, what did you know about Adnan and his relationship with Hay? And he said, I think it was his first real girlfriend. And I think that's why his reaction was so strong. I don't think it meant that much to her. I don't think that's wrong. It's high school, She's a high school girl. Oh, he's cute or whatever. Things fizzle out. I think there was another dude or something or whatever. I really don't know much about their relationship, if they hung out, when they hung out, he said, or where they hung out. And he said, for our age group, she was really independent. I believe she had a job also, but she seemed to be more mature, like she was 2, 3, 4 years older than us, like she was in junior in college, the way she acted, the way she moved and went about her day. She just seemed like an older chick who happened to be in high school. She also wasn't on the magnet side of the demographic, but that's a lie. They said she was on the magnet side. So why is he lying about that?
And see how sloppy he is with his memory that, Adnan was into Hay, but, she wasn't that into him. Oh, no. Read her letters to Adnan. She was totally in love with him. As much as teenagers can be, they pretty much worshipped each other. And she put a lot at risk with her family to see Adnan.
Right.
And evidently Jay doesn't know about this, or he's whitewashing after the
he
fact.
says, listen to this one. The interviewer says, when did he first talk to you about hurting her? And he said, it was at least a week before she died, when he found out she was either cheating on him or leaving him. We were in the car, we were riding, smoking. He just started opening up. It's in the evening after school. We never hung out in the morning, just normal conversation like, yeah, I think she's effing around. I'm going to kill that biatch, man. Nothing real pointed or anything like that. Not like, I know his name or I caught her, but I just thought he was shooting off like everyone else shoots off when they're mad at their girlfriend. He never said anything like, hey, what gauge gun should I use? Or how many minutes am I supposed to hold someone under the water for? Or is there a statute of limitations on murder? I thought he was just blowing off steam and BSing. I thought at worst he'd throw a rock through her window or something. Normal high school, I'm mad at her, I'll scratch her car sort of stuff. I had never known anyone who had killed anybody else, so there's no way I could have known. But look, if we start speculating what he had been thinking that far ahead, I don't know. He might really have just been BSing at the time. I don't know what happened, what occurred between them that day. I don't know if she said something he couldn't handle and he went off the edge, or if he'd been seriously speculating about it. I don't feel comfortable drawing conclusions like that. You can start drawing conclusions like that.
See what I mean about Jay? He really does not, he's not able to back up his main points, because Adnan and Hay were, now this is my memory of it, they were completely broken up, and Hay was in love with another guy.
Right.
And Adnan knew who it was. He knew that Hay was saying, you know, I'm not in love with you anymore. I'm now in love with this guy.
Right.
And so it wasn't like he just found out about it and went off the rails. It was not like that. Adnan knew about it.
Yeah.
You know, so this is how unreliable this Jay Wilds is. You just cannot trust what he says at that time or when this current interview took place. He's just kind of reaching to make himself look good.
Yeah, and then he says,
I think.
Yeah, it sounds kind of sketchy. It says, a big part of the Serial podcast is to speculate on Adnan's motive. What do you think? And he said, I don't necessarily know if he meant to kill Hai before he did it or if it was a sudden moment thing. But looking at his life, from what I saw, he seemed to be far out of his realm when it came to Hai leaving him. From the way he carried himself, at least, it looked like he had never lost anything before. And it was really hard for him to deal with being on the losing end. See, that just right there says to me he resented this guy, was jealous of this guy that had it all, according to what he says, right? In that situation, he was the loser. And people were starting to find out he was a loser. Again, speaks of resentment, jealousy. Oh, you and Hay aren't together anymore? She got a new boyfriend? And he didn't know how to deal with that. And the other thing about it, I mean, there looked like there was real hurt and pain. What else could motivate you to choke the life out of someone you cared about? He just couldn't come to grips with those feelings. However, he ended up doing it, whether it was premeditated or an involuntary reaction at that point in time. He just couldn't come to grips with being a loser and failing. He failed. He lost the girl. See, now I have not heard this, but I see this, and I see this guy is just so jealous of Adnan and trying to point out he's a loser because he probably felt like the loser, this Jay. And he said, I know right? I know he came from a very strict religious background and that he was very uneasy with some of the things he was doing. He was having a hard enough time with that itself. There were some big forces going on that didn't have anything to do with Hay. But like I said, I don't know how to come up with the story about how Adnan did it, why he did it, what he was thinking, how he was thinking, and why he was thinking that. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a cop. It's not my job to figure that out. Wow, that is speaking like real volumes there. Okay.
Oh boy.
Thank you, Debbie. I love you.
He's talking himself right into a corner there. Because he first stated that he really didn't know if they were broke up, you know, what exactly happened. He just found out about it that day, that she was seeing someone else. And now he's saying Adnan knew that she, you know, it's just, he's not consistent in his stories, and
Right.
that was pointed out. And it sounds to me like he's almost talking about himself
Yeah,
when
exactly.
he's saying, I don't know if he lost control of himself
Hmm.
and just did it impulsively. You know, I think he's speculating on himself, and maybe he was trying to move in on Hay when Adnan and she broke up, and uh, he could have thought, well, this is my opportune moment, and I'll ask her if she wants a ride, and then he could have taken her out there in the country to that park.
Right. And then he says, they ask him, when Adnan loaned you his car on January 13th, 1999, the day that she went missing, Hay went missing, did he tell you it was because he planned on murdering Hay? And he said, no, I didn't know that he planned to murder her that day. I didn't think he was going to kill her. We were in the car together during last period. He was ditching the last period, and I said, hey, I need to run to the mall because I need to get a gift for Stephanie. And he said then, no, I got to do something. I'm going to be late for practice, so just drop me off. Take my car, take my cell phone. I'll call you from someone else's phone when I'm done. I said, all right, cool. I dropped him off at the school, went to the mall, and then when I was done, I go back to my friend Jen's house where I normally go. I sit and smoke with my friend, and then he calls me up and he says, come pick me up. So I go to pick him up, and when I get there, he says, oh, shite, I did it. I said, did what? He said, I killed Hay. Yeah, that doesn't sound plausible. And someone said, at the Best Buy? And he said, yes. And they said, is this when you first saw Hay's body in the trunk of her car? And he said, no, I saw her body later in front of my grandmother's house where I was living. I didn't tell the cops it was in front of my house because I didn't want to involve my grandmother. I believe I told them it was in front of Kathy's house, but it was in front of my grandmother's house. I know it didn't happen anywhere other than my grandmother's house. I remember the highway traffic to my right, and I remember standing there on the curb. I remember Adnan standing next to me. And they said, let's back up. Tell me what happened when you arrived at Best Buy to pick up Adnan. He said, I picked him up. He doesn't have any car with him. Like, he's not in a car or anything. And it said, where was Hay's car? Was it in the Best Buy parking lot? And he said, Hay's car could have been in the parking lot, but I don't know what it looked like, so I don't remember. When I picked him up at Best Buy, he's telling me her car is somewhere there and that he did this in the parking lot. But that, according to what I learned later, is probably not what happened. Wherever her car was at the time I picked him up from Best Buy, it probably stayed there until he picked me up later that evening. And then it said, then what happens? Well, he said, it's starting to get dark, so it's between 3 and 4. We drive over to Kathy's house to smoke. Kathy has people over when we get there. Now, I don't want to tell the people at Kathy's that this guy I'm with just killed his girlfriend and the cops just called, because then they would be all part of this effed up thing. Who was at Kathy's apartment? He said Kathy, Jeff, Laura, and Jen. So when you arrived at Kathy's with Adnan after he tells you he murdered Hay? He said, yeah, we're sitting there smoking and he receives a phone call from the police and gets all panicky. I say, well, we need to part ways. I don't remember if he dropped me off at my house or if I got a ride from somebody else. What time did he get back to your place? He goes, I think, well, it's been 15 years, but I think around 6 p.m. And he says, okay, so then you and Adnan parted ways? And he said, yeah, he left in his car. I was trying to collect myself at my grandmother's house. I was pretty distraught, effed up, feeling guilty for not saying nothing. I don't know whether he calls me when he's on his way back to my house or if he calls me right outside my house. But he calls me and he says, I'm outside. So I come outside to talk to him and followed him to a different car, not his. And he said, you gotta help me, or I'm going to tell the cops about you and the weed and all that shite. And then he pops the trunk and I saw Hayes' body, and she kind of looked purple, blue. Her legs were tucked behind her. She had stockings on. None of her clothes were removed, nothing like that. She didn't look beat up. Let me see. Hay was in the truck of the car? Yes. And then what happened? And he says, Adnan said, just help me dig this hole. And I'm still thinking, inner city black guy selling pot to high school kids. The cops are going to fry me. They're going to pin me to the effing wall. I've had cops show up and harass me before at my house. And I told Adnan that I wouldn't touch her car or any of her possessions. And I say, F it. I'll help you dig the hole. And they said, why did you agree to help him? And he said, because at the time I was convinced that I would be going to jail for a long time if he turned me in for drug dealing. So, especially to high school kids, I was also running drug operations from my grandmother's house. So that would ruin her life too. I was also around a bunch of people early in that day at Kathy's, and I didn't want them to get effed up with homicide. So I said, look, man, I'm not touching. Hey, you're in this on your own. I'm being manipulated into what's being done right now. Did you go to Leakin Park immediately after agreeing to help? And he said, no. Adnan left and then returned to my house several hours later, closer to midnight, in his own car. He came back with no tools or anything. He asked me if I had shovels. So I went inside my house and I got some gardening tools, and we got in his car and started driving. I asked him where we're going, and he said, didn't you say everyone gets dumped in Leakin Park? I said, drug dealers, people who get killed by drug dealers. And I'm thinking to myself, when did I ever say that? So as I'm riding with him to the park and it starts raining, and I'm thinking to myself as he pulls over, I'm thinking, this is the spot he's chosen. I'm also thinking, what's making him think I'm totally okay with this? Like if a car goes by and I jump out and wave at them saying, hey, there's a murderer right here. But I didn't. I'm pretty sure it was my fear of going to prison for having a bunch of weed at my grandma's house. Yeah, you know, like, because he's going to go away that long for having some weed at his grandmother's house, then he's going to take a chance on being an accomplice in a murder, right?
Right.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
Convenient.
It's very good critical thinking. Okay. He knew I was afraid of that.
I agree.
And then he said he was afraid of implicating the people that were at Kathy's house just smoking because they could get involved in the homicide. Like, how's that going to happen? Doesn't make any sense. And then he says, yeah, did you and Adnan dig the grave? And he said, yeah, we dig it for about 40 minutes and we dig, and he's digging less and less. Okay. Okay. At a certain point, I say, well, F, I'm finished. I'm effing done. And Adnan's like, oh, well, you're not going to help me move her, are you? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to help you move her. He says, oh, well, I'm going to need you to drive back to her car. And they said, where was Hayes' car? And he said, somewhere up around a corner, up on a hill. It was parked in a strange neighborhood. It's just on the street. I didn't know it was that close. And he said, I'm going to drive back down there to the grave. You follow me some of the way, and then I'll take care of it. And they said, you drove him to Hayes' car? Yes. We got into his car, and he drives me up around the corner to Hayes' car. And he says, okay, so now Jay's in her car, right?
Right.
This is so great, okay? Yeah, we get into her car, and he drives me up around the corner to Hayes' car, and he says, okay, follow me halfway back down the hill towards the gravesite. So he doesn't have to walk all the way back up the hill to get back to me in his car. So I follow him halfway down the hill. I park, I smoke some cigarettes, and he's gone with Hayes' car. Then he says it takes him about a half an hour, 45 minutes, and he comes back with gloves on, panting like she was really heavy. That's all he says, and that's about burying her. Then they said Adnan had just buried Hay all on his own. Yeah, when we were digging the hole, it's not like Hay's body was just lying next to us. She was still in the trunk. Now, whenever they say that, that usually means the body was lying next to them. Okay, then
Yep.
what? And he's like, I've got to put her car somewhere. So I follow him around for a few minutes, and he just picks a place at random behind some row houses. He leaves her car, he gets into his car, and he takes me home. Okay, why is this story different from the one you originally told the police? Why was your story changed over time? And Jay says, well, first of all, I wasn't openly willing to cooperate with the police. It wasn't until they made it clear they weren't interested in procurement of pot that I began to open up any. And then I would only give them information pertaining to my interaction with someone or where I was. They had to chase me around before they could corner me to talk to me. And there came a point when I was just sick of talking to them, and they wouldn't stop interviewing me or questioning me. I wasn't fully cooperating, so if they said, well, we have on phone records that you talked to Jen, I'd say, nope, I didn't talk to Jen, until Jen told me that she talked with cops and that it was okay if I did too. I stonewalled them that way.
Oh,
No,
brother.
until they told me they weren't trying to prosecute me for selling weed or trying to get any of my friends in trouble. People had lives and they were trying to get into college and stuff like that. Getting them in trouble for anything that they knew or that I had told them, I couldn't have that. I guess I was kind of a jury on whether or not people needed to be involved or whatever, but these people didn't have anything to do with it. I knew they didn't have anything to do with it. That's the best way I can account for the inconsistencies. Once the police made it clear that my drug dealing wasn't going to affect the outcome of what was going on, I became a little more transparent. And then it says, did you make the anonymous call to the police to tip them off about Adnan? No, he said. Do you know who did? I don't know, but there was a grand jury hearing on the case, and I have an idea who might have, based on that hearing. Crazy.
Sure, Jay, sure.
Yeah. His theory on the anonymous caller, why he agreed to testify in this. Oh my gosh. This is
See
crazy.
why it's so problematic that this guy was the number one witness.
Yeah.
Just everything about him is off. You know, in some things he's got a laser sharp, detailed memory. The small things like where a car was parked, but then other huge things like where her body was when, he just can't seem to put it all together. You know, when he's just a hot mess, and I think that's one of the reasons that they let Adnan out, is looking over this. You know, you can really see this guy. You know, if he was so caring about all his friends, why was he selling them drugs?
Yeah.
You know, that could have got him in trouble too.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Big trouble, according to him. He was afraid he was going to go to prison for it. But
It's all weird,
yeah, he wasn't concerned about his friends then.
It's very weird, yeah. And then he's saying that, let's see what he said. He said, I have an idea who might have made that call based on that hearing. I know that during the grand jury, there was a spiritual leader of the mosque. I don't know how to pronounce his name, something with a B. We'll refer to this person as Mr. B. He spoke with the police during the investigation, but when he was called to the grand jury, he pled the Fifth Amendment. So that whatever he knew about Adnan, that if he said it in court, he could also be in trouble. I believe that Mr. B had the information that we don't have, possibly because he was a religious leader at the mosque, and Adnan talked to him like a priest taking a confession. Okay, and they said, note, this is Jay's speculation. We were not able to confirm if Mr. B served in a leadership or spiritual advisor role at any mosque. He said, I believe it's possible that he's the person who made the anonymous call to the police saying to check into Adnan. And they said, why do you think he did that? And he said, well, maybe Adnan lost his shite and confided in the one person he could trust, not to tell anyone. Do you think of testifying as brave or cowardly? They asked him. And he said, It's necessary for me to sleep at night. I don't know. It keeps going around and around and around, like I'm worried God is going to strike me down. I can't have this in the back of my mind. I'm going to get a lightning bolt or something. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this down to make sure at night I can sleep. And it said, did you feel a sense of shame after you told the police about your involvement with burying Hay? And he said, I felt quite ashamed and embarrassed. My girlfriend's mother learned about it and spit in my face and called me a murderer. She cussed me out. And how could I let that girl lay out there in the snow for all that time when I knew where she was? I felt ashamed. Damn near got suicidal at one point. I had a lot of feelings like I should have done something better or listened better. Did testifying at Adnan's trial make you feel better or worse? He said the lawyers and police representing the state made me feel like I did well or like I did the right thing. And for a time, they made me feel better, but it never felt good. It did feel necessary. What I didn't know was that all this time later, it would affect my family. What do you mean about people who have listened to Serial and have said in public forums like Reddit or Twitter that you should be punished for participating in helping dispose of Hay's body? He said, not all your humanity is gone when you do something wrong. Criminals are criminals and they do effed up shite, but that doesn't mean they don't still have some sort of a moral compass. And once you engage in a criminal act, and they go like you did, like I did, you don't lose your link to humanity. And they said, what would you have done differently? And he said, I don't know if me not moving in Adnan's circle of people would have saved her life. Like, I don't know if I sold more weed or less weed, that Hay would still be alive. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if there's anything else I could have done. Maybe I could have listened better and taken what I heard more seriously. And then the interviewer says, in Serial, Sarah Koenig references a moment in the trial where Adnan calls you pathetic before you go up to the witness stand. Do you remember that moment? I think he mouthed something to me, but no, but nothing like that would be able to get the better of me. When did you first become aware that Sarah Koenig was working on something about this trial? And he said, earlier this summer, I got some phone calls from people back in Baltimore that a reporter was asking about me and the case. I also got a message around the time from a friend on Facebook saying that some lady is asking about Adnan. But it didn't stick with me, and I didn't look into it much further. But earlier this year, I had to go back east and was back in Baltimore because my grandmother died. When I was there, I heard from a few people that Koenig was harassing people at their jobs, making countless phone calls to people who kept saying they did not want to speak with her. I was talking to one of my friends who had just recently gotten over a drug addiction, who said she tried to talk to about this case, and he told me that it was really painful for him, and he didn't want to go back into it and revisit this crap. Tell me about the day she arrived at your house. He says, there was a knock at my door in late August, early September. I can't remember exactly when, but I remember I was changing my clothes. As soon as I opened that door, I knew it was her, the woman who's harassing my friends in Baltimore. Was she alone? No, it was her and another woman, her serial producer, Julie Snyder. She said she was a reporter from New York and that she worked on a show called This American Life. And I knew there was only one thing that anyone would want to come talk to me about as a reporter, you know? She said you invited her in. I did. I asked her straightforward, where did the story come from? How did you hear about it? And she said she was a reporter at the time of the trial and knew Christina Gutierrez, Adnan's lawyer. So I continued questioning her, and it was clear there were key people who weren't talking to her, like Hay's family, the detectives, and other people who ducked and dodged lawyers and cops so they wouldn't come to testify. I told Sarah that the only one who deserves any type of closure from this is her mom, Hay's mom. Had some unanswered questions, and she needs to know what happened here. Then I'd say, I'll walk you through all that. That's the only person I'm going through all that shite for. Did she ever say she was doing a podcast? No, she said she was doing a radio show. They pitched it to me as NPR radio show. I could also tell that she was uncomfortable talking to me. Her lips were quivering, and I just felt like she was lying. They were in the love seat over there, and the body language was just really making me uncomfortable. It was confusing because they also pitched the story to me as a documentary and that they wanted to put me on a video. By this time, my wife was getting real upset. Our kids were crying. My wife knows about my involvement in this case because I eventually cooperated with police and testified. I know that there are people back home who would consider me a snitch and would hurt me. So for the most part, we've been really protective about our privacy. My wife would regularly Google my name to make sure none of my personal information would show up. So when these two women show up at my door, it sent my wife into a panic. And when we asked them how she got our address, Koenig said something like, "Sadly, it wasn't hard to find." Was the name Serial ever used? No, not to my recollection. She kept saying This American Life, the radio, and a documentary. There was no talk of Serial or a podcast. Then I asked her outright,
Oh my God.
"Are you an advocate for Adnan?" And she said no, she wasn't his advocate, but she said she had talked to Adnan and that she wanted to get more information about the case. She said there was new evidence, and I said no new evidence that's going to change what I saw and explain that away. Let him. But there's no evidence that's going to change what I saw. I don't know how she was murdered. I don't know exactly how she got put in that trunk. And I told the cops that. If Koenig wants to get into how all that happened, she can go there. But that doesn't change what I saw. And that's the only time I commented directly on the case to her. Did you ask her to leave at any point? Yes. My wife took all of our kids upstairs, and I think she started Googling Sarah and the other producer. I was downstairs and asked them if they had any business cards that said who they were. They said they didn't have any of them, and that she had to go out to her car and get one. And when she came back with a card that didn't even have her name on it, she apologized for bombarding us and said that she felt bad that she made us uncomfortable and that she was really sorry. I asked them to leave at this point because they were upsetting my wife and kids, but she said she was going to be around for another 2 days and hopefully we could schedule another time to talk with him. And it wouldn't be in our house. She kept saying, it's going to be in your interest to talk to me, and that just started to feel like a threat. Like if I didn't talk to her, it was going to be bad news for me. When did you see her again? She sent me an email the next day. And then they show the email and it says, "Hello, Jay. I promise I won't use this email to badger you, but I did want to thank you for talking to us yesterday and for letting us use your house. I know it wasn't an easy visit for you or your family. Both Julie and I felt pretty terrible that we caused such an upheaval. We didn't want or mean for that to happen, but I completely understand why it did. I thought it would be important for you to meet me in person so you could get a sense of who I am and what my intentions are, but I also recognize what a jarring intrusion it was, and I'm sorry about that. I also want to thank you for taking the time to think it over. I get it's a big decision. Of course, we'd be more than happy to have coffee or a drink with you and your wife today, Saturday, or tomorrow to answer your questions and to try our best to ease any fears you might have. Again, I'm not out to vilify anyone. No one's talking about revenge or retribution here. That's not what this is about. I'm not on anyone's side. I'm a reporter and I'm trying to figure the case out. I know you and your wife were concerned that we found you. Alas, it wasn't that difficult at all, so I can't protect you from that, obviously, but I can do my best to make you hard to identify in the story so that if someone Googled your name, for instance, my story wouldn't come up. I'm not using your last name, and I won't say where you live or anything about your family. When you ask what's the benefit to you, it's a little hard for me to answer because it's kind of a personal question specific to you, and I don't know you well enough to answer it. But what I can tell you with confidence is that I think in the end you'll feel better with the end result if you're an active voice in the story rather than someone who's being talked about. You get to do the talking. I think the simplest pitch I can make to you, you have a story about what's happened to you, and you should be the one to tell it. That's why I came to your location to ask you to tell your story. You're in the documentary either way, so it just seems more respectful and fair to let you tell what happened rather than for me having to piece it together from what I can glean from your record. On paper, in the trial transcript, you're two-dimensional, but in real life, of course, you're more than just the state's witness. You're a person who went through a traumatic thing. To hear you call yourself a scoundrel with scruples, that made me want to understand who you were then and who you are now, and also, even just meeting you yesterday, for that short time, hearing you talk so forcefully about what you saw and about Adnan's guilt for both Julie and me, that was powerful and clarifying. No one else knows what you know about this whole case, and so even just a few things you said, it's exactly what I've been waiting to hear. And then the interviewer says, what did you imagine was going to happen if you didn't talk to her? And he said, I thought since I didn't cooperate with her, that she would just make a little blurb about me in the story, and then she would move on to whatever else new evidence was or whatever Adnan had to tell her. I didn't think I would be demonized. Have you listened to the podcast? I've never been able to listen to the podcast. My wife reads the transcripts and tells me about them. The first time I started to get really scared and feel jeopardized by Serial was in the middle of the night, one night, maybe around the second or third week of the show. One of my buddies from Baltimore calls me and says, hey, man, they got your voice across the radio and shite, man, talking about the shite that happened a while ago. They're saying your name and shite. They've got you plastered across the internet. And so they said, supposing Conan came here and said up front that based on her conversations with Adnan, revealing the evidence in this case and talking to other people, that she believed there was a good chance that Adnan is likely innocent. If she told you that up front and was completely transparent about what she thought about this case, would you have felt more comfortable talking to her? No, I would have felt the same thing. There's nothing that's going to change the fact that this guy drove up in front of my grandmother's house, popped the trunk, and had his dead girlfriend in the trunk. Anything that's going to make him look innocent doesn't involve me. Yeah.
Oh,
Hay was dead before she got to my house. Anything that makes Adnan innocent doesn't involve me. There is a specific point where I became involved in this. And what happened before that, I don't know. Maybe Adnan had something to tell her, something magical that happens that changes all the facts in this case. But she can talk to him about that. I don't have anything to add. There's no point in me participating in this conversation. And then he said, if you're telling the truth, then what harm would it be to talk to Koning? I am telling the truth. And look what happens when I didn't talk to her. Look how she demonized me. And I feel like if I did talk to her, it would have given her twice as much ammo. And then he said, she came to my house and frightened me and my wife. And then Julie Snyder, the other lady, came out and said that I had animal rage. Wow. Would you have talked to another reporter? And he said, before this podcast happened? No. Only if Hayes' family wanted me to, so that they could have some sort of peace. I don't want to talk about this for entertainment purposes. Oh, wow. And then they said, why did you decide to talk to me? Well, I'm trying to clear my name. I'm worried for the safety of my family. I think the truth is important. I'm trying to tell it, not for entertainment value. In what ways has this changed your life? And he said, do you ever read Reddit? Have you seen the subreddit about this case and what they're saying about me? Reporter says, yes. Everything's changed, he says. Wow.
Well, you did help bury a body, so.
Yeah, I just don't even understand why I guess they dropped everything for him to be the state witness, but wow.
Yeah, it's so pesky, Larky, when two reporters show up and ask you about your involvement with a murder. That was so inconvenient for him.
So unexpected.
Yeah, just right out of the blue, they wanted to ask him about his accessory to murder.
Yeah, and then they
The nerve of them.
And then he said, this is really interesting. I'll put the links to this interview in the description when we're done. but it says, what has your life been like since Serial first aired? And he said, the thing that's been the most scary for my family has been people showing up at my house, and twice I've caught people videotaping our home and me. When did you notice strangers around your house? Right before Thanksgiving, I caught someone taking a picture of my house. He said, the reporter said, you asked me if I read Reddit. Do you? I can't. It makes me too upset, he said. My wife has taken screenshots of direct threats and serious accusations about my character. And they show one that says, yes, I have Jay's address in blah, blah, blah. I live in blah, 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 which is not far. And I'm going to go to his house this weekend to confront him. How do I send you his address? I don't want to post it here where everyone can see it. That's a screenshot she took. How does she respond to it? She's devastated because we have young kids in the house and we used to let them walk to school. Now we don't, because we don't know if someone from the internet is going to take their picture or harass them. And she is just trying to be protective of them. Have you filed a police report? Yes, we filed a police report. Someone reached out to my wife, somebody that she didn't know, saying that she was worried for my family. And then this person said she was worried because somebody posted her address on a public forum, and they said they planned to confront me. A lot of this information has been posted on Reddit, I assume, the reporter says. Yes, Jay says. Now it looks like the moderators of the forum are trying to delete any personal information of ours after it's posted, but they weren't that good about it when it first started. Sometimes stuff would be left up on Reddit about me for days and weeks at a time. It had to be checked and the post deleted. People were able to go on my Facebook page and pull pictures of my kids, my dog, my house, my wife. People have also posted information about my family, criminal charges against me, my dad, my uncle. I don't know why that's all relevant to what Adnan did. I mean, I know that I was a criminal, and I know that even after this happened, I didn't have an occupation. I mean, I kept doing my job of criminal shite, but I'm past all that now. I made a good home for my wife and kids. Do you blame Sarah Koenig for the actions and speculation of Reddit commenters? I feel like she created an evil persona of me and sensationalized my motives. It helped fan the flames of this story that people had already moved on from. Have you reached out to anyone at Serial about the harassment? Yeah. I got an email back from Sarah about it after I had posted the Facebook message. After you and I spoke on the phone, Sarah asked me for another interview. And they put her email, says, hello, Jay, I saw your post on Facebook. I'm raising my hand once again to ask you if you had talked to me. As you probably know, the final installment of my story was last week. But if you want to talk, we can always do another episode so that you can tell your story about what happened to Hay and about what happened to you. My goal has always been to get this story right. Please know that to me, this case has never been about entertainment. I am mindful all the time that everyone involved in this case is a real person and not a character, not a stereotype, but a real person. I don't know if you've listened to the podcast, but in every episode I try to convey that and to respect that. If you change your mind about an interview, please feel free to contact me at your convenience. And then he says, I sent her an email back asking if she'd been leaking court documents or my personal information to Reddit. My wife told me that she thought either Sarah or one of the producers was talking to a moderator on Reddit, and I felt that either Sarah or Rabia Chaudhry, who is longtime friends with Adnan and who first brought the story to Koenig, was giving confidential information about me to Reddit. And I asked her if that's true, and she replied no, but I didn't believe her. I did not think that she was being honest with me. And then she wrote back and she said, you say I'm not answering specific questions, but I am. And here is my answer again, as clear as I can make it. Neither I nor anyone I have actually worked with, the staff of Serial or This American Life, has ever given anything to Reddit, period. Nor did we authorize or deputize someone else to do it. It would have been stupid and irresponsible for us to have given anything to Reddit. We're not that dumb, for one thing. And anyway, I don't believe in crowdsourcing an investigation. This is not a loophole or a sneaky way to have a plausible deniability. It's a straightforward, complete, and true answer. As for Rabia, I'll say it again, I don't know. She might have posted it, but I don't know. I don't know because she hasn't told me and I haven't asked. Again, do you want me to ask Robbie about any of this? You seem to be under the impression that I want to do you harm or have a secret agenda or have purposely withheld information to make you look bad or have knowingly reported things that aren't true. None of this is correct. In fact, the opposite is true. I realize you might not be able to accept that right now or perhaps ever, but my intention has been the same from the beginning, to get the story right and to treat everybody fairly. There are so many other things I could have reported, but I didn't, because they seem potentially damaging or unfair, and they weren't directly related to the crime. Not just about you, but about other people involved in the case. In other words, I'm not out to get anyone or to damage anyone's reputation. I only reported information that we deemed relevant to understand this case. It sounds like you don't believe Koning still. I don't, Jay said. How has this show affected your employment? Has it? Yes, of course. There's no way I can actually prove it, you know. But when the podcast started, I had a job in construction. I was hired on the project, and about 3 weeks after the podcast started, when it really started to blow up on the internet and my name was out there and people were speculating and the word murder would pop up with my name, I was told that by my supervisor that they hired too many people for the job and that they had to let 5 of us go. But within a week, a couple of those people were hired back along with a new person. I don't think they got rid of me because they think I committed a murder, but I do think they didn't want to take that on, you know? They don't need people coming to work, to the work site, confronting me or harassing other people I work with. And let's see. What's so frustrating about this is that there hasn't been any clear fights. It hasn't been confrontational. It's been 100 little things that have happened, like cars parked outside my house for an hour. Somebody just stops talking to me at work before I was let go. People taking my picture. It's the doorbell ringing and my wife jumping 6 feet into the air because she's so scared. It makes me feel paranoid, and it also makes me feel angry because the mistakes I've made are on me and not on my family. And there's a part of me that just wants to break away from them and live in the bushes or in the Appalachian Mountains so they can be safe. Has this affected your wife's work? That's my biggest fear. So far, it hasn't crept into her work life, but she works in the nonprofit world with needy people, and she works for places that fundraise, and it makes me sick to think maybe people might not give money to these very good places that do a lot of good for people because of me. I'm not trying to insult anyone, but a lot of times people don't read any further than what they see on a headline. I know my criminal record's out there. One of the charges is domestic violence, but I was never convicted. It's an argument over a set of keys with an ex-girlfriend I wasn't getting along with. People don't read to the end of the document to see unsubstantiated or not convicted. My family are normal, regular people. They've never been stabbed. They've never had anyone call them on a phone saying they're going to kill them. My wife is normal, suburban type of person. She's not used to being petrified or doing laps in the cul-de-sac or taking a different route because she thinks she's being followed. Those things aren't operating protocol for her. Have you considered changing your name? I can't. No. They'd have to kill me before that happens, and if that means living like a dog in the bushes, that's okay. No one's getting my name. It's the one reason I haven't taken down my Facebook profile. For a while, it was even public. I'm going to ask you something that I have a real personal interest in, nor did I stick my head out much for the podcast, but it seems to be something that people have really latched onto, and that those are likely the people who are reading the interview. So let's give them what they want. Are you cool with that? Okay. There's a theory circulating on an enthusiastic website like Reddit that you felt threatened by Adnan's relationship to your then girlfriend Stephanie, and that's why you have some sort of vengeance plot against Adnan. He laughs. I dated Stephanie from junior high until junior year of college. I loved her a lot, but if there was any risk of infidelity, it was going to come from me. I knew they'd make a big deal on the podcast about her and Adnan both getting crowned homecoming court. Let's see, the two were crowned prom prince and princess, but I was like, yeah, baby, go get your crown. I knew what the crown was coming home to, so no, I was at no point threatened by Adnan. But I can tell you about the time that Adnan threatened me about Stephanie. Please do. A few days after night at Leakin Park with Hay, the night of the murder? Yeah. He drove Stephanie to my house because her car had broken down, and we talked for a minute, and he said something like, I can be alone with her whenever I like, because me and Stephanie are friends. I took that as a threat. Not that he could steal my girlfriend, but that he could hurt her. I told him to his face, that's not a very smart thing to say to me. Was that the last time you talked to Stephanie? Well, no, when was the last time you talked to Stephanie? I called her yesterday. We're only loose acquaintances now, but since I've been talking more, I just wanted to make sure she was okay with it. That I was opening up about all this because, like I said in the past, I had shielded her from as much of this as I could. We got into it a little bit, and I told her that she was naive about Adnan. After the murder, she didn't believe that he did it. We argued a little bit because I leaned on her and said, I wouldn't have ever really been in contact with Adnan had she not suggested that I sell weed to him. Okay, one last question. What did you end up buying Stephanie at the mall? I think it was a gold bracelet, possibly a gold necklace. I know that it was a piece of jewelry that came in a jewelry box and it cost $70 or $80. Okay, and that's it. So that's interesting. I don't ever remember reading that interview. So that really changes a lot of things for me.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can't remember that stuff about his girlfriend Stephanie, but the more he talks, the more he incriminates himself.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of that sounds really weird.
Right. But it doesn't even matter because nobody's going to get past I helped bury the body or I helped dispose of the body. I was part of that.
Yeah, and it sounds more like one person dug that grave than two strong boys, because remember, she wasn't really buried.
Shallow, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was.
Right, but he drove one of the cars or waited for him, and
He got the shovels
he
from
was
his
an
house. He got the
accessory.
shovels from his house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was definitely an accessory, so.
Yeah. Very odd. Very odd. Very odd. And of course, I'm like really late for my other one. But we're definitely going to continue on with this because there's a lot more information. And so maybe you guys, in the meantime, that haven't, can listen to the Serial podcast. And I'll update with the links for these interviews so you can read them for yourself later too. And then we can revisit this and dig into it deeper, because I have another live schedule where I think you'll really want to hear that too, because the people that were stalked and harassed by Alex Belfield have released a lot of information today in their own words and everything, and I want to go over that. So I'm going to redirect this, so just stay where you are. It'll redirect you, and then when I'm done with that, I'll update this with the links that you need for the podcast and everything else. So let me do that. Hold on a second. Do the redirect.
Caroline, can I tell you one thing?
Sure.
Now, tomorrow I am having my cataract surgery.
Oh my gosh, really? Tomorrow?
Yeah, and and it isn't until the afternoon, so I'm probably going to be recovering.
Okay, well, we'll pray for you,
And
Janae.
stuff.
Yeah, prayers that everything goes well and you're seeing great. I know Nancy had good results, so I think you will too.
Yes. Nancy really encouraged me to go ahead and get this because I was so scared when she said she about went blind. And my eyesight hasn't been the best either. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get it done, and I'm going to be really happy to have better eyesight. And thank you for discussing this case, because I was very into it, and it's just an excellent podcast to anybody who really wants to be entertained. She said it wasn't for entertainment, but it's it's very interesting, let's put it that way, and
Yeah.
you just learn a lot. So anyway, thank you, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut off. And,
Okay.
I'll talk to y'all soon. Love y'all. Thank you.
Love you too.
Thank
Good
you,
luck tomorrow.
Caroline.
Prayers, and we'll be thinking of you. Yeah, and we'll
Thank
check
you,
in with you.
everybody.
All right. Yeah, everybody's giving you prayers. And to the people in the chat, please come and see us on the next one. It's going to start right after this. It'll direct you right over. And so, hi, Cute Kitty Kitty. Hi, Robbity Bob, and everybody else I missed. But I hope to see you on the next one. So let me end this one.